Hey, this is Gary, and welcome back to my channel. And in this video, we're going to show you how to make a basic assault game like Space Invaders. So I've updated the animation, so I've added the set rotation to the animation interface. That was something that got missed, so that'll be in the next release, version 19. And so our base animation, while he always had set rotation, now it's part of the interface so that it overrides that. Then in the layered animation, I've set the width and height based off of the animations that are passed in, and so it gets the maximum width and height based on those animations. Otherwise, it was setting it to 0. And then I override the rotation, and what it does is it loops through all those animations and then sets those rotations. And so now we can set the rotation on any of our animations. This is a controlled motion class. This is similar to the controlled movement class, except this is based on motion. So you have a list of animations, and then you can set the current index on which animation you want to display. And so this is if you want to have certain things to happen with the character display to run different animations depending on what kind of state he's currently in. And so the directions don't do anything, and it's just the motions. So I updated the invasion project here. And so in here, when I create the aliens, I'm creating different block animations. So these are just different colors. So I'm going to have it cycle through different colors randomly. So I can create. So I created my control motion, pass in all those animations, and I set that as my move motion for my alien. And then in my alien troops, I've added a list of controlled motions. This is for the motions for each of those aliens that get added to the screen. I've added a random class and a countdown class. And so when I set the aliens, it's going to loop through all those lists, all those aliens, and then add that control motion to my list of motions. Then as part of my update here at the end, I'm going to check my countdown. If it gets below 0, I'm going to loop through my motions and set this current index to be a random number between 0 and 4. And then I'll reset my countdown to 1, and then I start decrementing my countdown based on what the delta time is. So I will demonstrate that. And so here are my aliens, and so their colors change every second. And it's just changing the current index to do that. Now, obviously, there's other ways to change the colors randomly than creating something as complex as this. But say in this situation that when the aliens are moving, when he does these corner edges here, he goes down here and then back. Maybe I want the alien to display a different animation as opposed to the animation that's running here. And so I can control that through the controlled motion. Now I'm going to go over the GameState framework. The GameState is an abstract class that implements updatable, and what it's for is it monitors the game as it progresses, and when a certain event or action happens, it will change the state to a new game state. This functionality abstracts out kind of the changing of the state, creating the new base screen and disposing of the previous screen. It has a activate state, as a change state, deactivate state, and set game state controller, and an update method. And so every time in the game loop that there's an update, your game state can check if the state needs to be changed. If it needs to be changed, it will call the change state method. And the change state will call the deactivate the state. So you can call your dispose from here. Then it'll get to the controller and set the game state to a new game state. And changing the state, you pass in that new game state. The game state controller has a set screen and a set game state. The base game implements that game state controller. And the base game has a current state associated with it. And you can get that game state from the base game. And then you can set the game state. And when you set the game state, it will set it as a current state, set the game state controller in that state, and then it will activate that state automatically. Then in our render method, we call the update of that current state, passing in that delta time. Then I've created a screen settings interface, and that's for getting the game state, getting sprite batch, and getting a viewport. And this is used by the base screen. And so when the setup screen is called, it gets a screen settings, and from that interface, it just gets what it needs: the sprite batch, the viewport, and the game state. And so that's being called from base game set screen, where it does a call for setup screen and sets everything that needs to be in that base screen. Now I'm going to show the game state in action. So here's my original battle scene. And what I've done is I've added a float for the speed of our aliens. And then for our alien troop builder, I pass in that speed. And I've also added a texture. And so we have an alien spaceship, and I can show you how that control movement kind of works in a different way as part of this. And so what it does is this has a method to see if the troop is done. So it's basically looking for when the lowest troop is less than the 480 on the Y axis. And I'm going to output what that lowest location is so that we can see when he gets there. In the alien troop builder, this is where I set the speed. And so that's where our alien troops, we set the speed. And then for the texture, for the create aliens, I take that texture and then I'm creating a controlled motion based on the animation being the ship facing down, facing to the right, and facing to the left. And then in our alien troops, we have our movement and we set that speed here. And as he's moving and when he changes directions, we're going to have it kind of face in a different direction than where he's moving. And you'll see that when we run this. Now we're going to look at the battle state. So now the battle state will change once it reaches that 480 mark on the y-axis. We're going to change the state. And basically we're just going to restart our battle state again. So the activate will create a new battle scene, passing in what the current speed is, and then the controller will set our screen to the current screen. Deactivate, we're just taking our current screen and just calling dispose. And then in the update method, we're going to check the current screen to see if the troops are done, where it basically checks to see if it's below that 480 mark. And then if it is, we're going to update our speed by adding in a 0.5 to the float. And then we're going to change the state, passing in this class again. I'm going to add an additional state. This will be for the splash screen. So this is kind of a separation of concerns. So this contains the splash screen, which is just my Everkeep logo, just a static animation and a decor. And I also want to have an effect where it'll fade from black and then fade back into black. And I'm going to add a block animation that's black. It's going to take the entire screen. And I'm going to add a chain effect, which is a new effect type. And that block animation is just going to be another decor. Add those to my game map. And I set my controller to be that screen. And that's in my activate state. My deactivate state is just to dispose it. And then we're just going to do an update where if our counter is greater than 8 seconds, then it will move to the battle state. Now that chain effect is a new type of effect, and it has a list of effects that will be run in order, one after the other. So you can create a chain effect with your effects, and I'll add them to the list. or you can add additional effects at the end, and the chain effect will be done when all the effects are, when the last one is done and the current is the last one. And then the reset just resets everything. Update animation, where we get their current effect, and then we update our animation with that effect. Also the same with the motion and our update method. And we'll take whatever the current effect is, check to see if it's done. If it's not, it will update it. If it is done and it is still less than the number of effects that are available, then it will increment our current, get the new current effect, and then update it. And I've added a no effect, and this is an effect that does nothing, but it does have a duration. And so if our time, which keeps track of the current time of this effect, if it's greater than or equal to our duration, then it is done. The update animation and update motion don't do anything. The update just increments our time based off of that time delta. So back to our splash screen, the block animation has that chain effect where we translucency, we go from full black to transparent. Do that for 2 seconds. And then translucency effect that we're just fully transparent for 3 seconds. And then we're transparent, we go from transparent to fully opaque for 2 seconds. And then for our block, we add that effect. So to set up the game state, so here in our base game where we're creating it, we create our new splash state, and then we just set the game state. The API will then call the setup and set the game screen accordingly. And so when the game runs, so this is our spaceship, he's going to move to the right, and then he's going to go down, and he's going to face in the opposite direction. And then he'll come back this way, and then he'll move to the other side, and then he'll do the same thing on the other side. All right, now we'll run our sequence. So it comes up, we have our splash screen. You can see it's fully opaque. It fades to black. And we start our game. So now our little spaceships are all pointing down, and over here he'll move at a diagonal. Instead of going the direction of the angle, they do the controlled movement. So the same on this side. And now he's coming towards the bottom. Now he's going faster. We restart our battle state, and he goes through the sequence again. And he comes back and forth. And the battle state starts again. Now he's running even faster. So now he's going to end up going through this pretty quick and even faster and faster until it goes super fast. So in this video, I'll recap. We went through the controlled motion where we can have, instead of directional, make it do something different. And then we added our game states where we can change the state after some event or incident happens. And then we also improved our effects where we can now chain those together. All right, and this video is going to be kind of short, but went over quite a bit. And if you have any comments, just leave them in the comments below. And feel free to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.